So, hello everyone, and welcome to Colum McCann. We're very great. We're very happy to have you here in conversation with us for the Premio for Rezzori. And first of all, congratulations for being in the shortlist.
Well, thank you so much. It's such an honor, and what a short list as well. It's fantastic. So thank you so much. I was delighted.
Yeah. So we are gonna talk about this book is Apeirogon. The cover I'm showing you guys is the American version of the Italian version is published by Feltrinelli. So first of all, it's a big book, and meaning that is a great book. It's the kind of masterpiece that you find in the bookstore, and at the beginning you think, oh my god, so many pages, and so it has to be important, because sometimes there are so many books that have so many pages, and at the end you think, okay, I spent days, weeks, and then so what? And there are other books in which you spend so much time, and at the end, the number of pages is even, I would say, weaker and lower than the effect of the book. This is one of these cases, and so Apeirogon is a novel, and is structured in 1001 fragments. There are little chapters. Some of them are even a line. Some are just one picture. So there are also images in the book, and as soon as you start, you feel that you are kind of unbalanced. You don't know exactly where you are. There are birds flying. There's a guy riding a motorcycle. You are in. You don't know exactly where you are. So it's kind of a displacement. And it's the kind of thing that when I find, I feel, I would say, at ease. I'm happy when I lost my balance, when I lose my sense of orientation, and that's basically what I ask literature. I don't want to be confirmed. The word is exactly as I thought it was. I want to be displaced. I want to be disoriented. I want to be disappointed. I want to think, oh my God, I thought I was, my idea of the world was that. Why it's changing so much? So the disorientation, the lack of orientation that at the beginning, from the very first chapters, the reader feel, I guess, is the best preface. So you have to be scared at the very beginning to be very relaxed and thinking that there's no way to find a way out that will be straightforward. You, as a reader, when you read the Apeirogon, you all of a sudden you realize that you are in a labyrinth, and that the labyrinth is the right place you have to be, and you have to walk in the labyrinth and understand where you are. So everybody knows the story, but basically the very center of this story that is told in this kind of encyclopedic and fragmented way is the story about two fathers. It's the story about two fathers, and of two, we could say, either two daughters that aren't there anymore, because they died, and because they died in the conflict, because of the conflict in the context of the conflict between Israel and Palestine. And so the very core of the book is two fathers telling their stories, and the stories of their daughters, meaning trying to keep them alive telling the story. So let's start not from this point that is the very core, but from the title. Why Apeirogon?
Oh, well, thank you for those beautiful words. And a paragon is a shape with a countably infinite number of sides. I know it's an unusual title, and I'm so happy that my Italian publishers were brave enough to use the word as a title. And I wanted to write, as you say, a unconventional novel. I wanted to throw people off balance. I wanted to say that it's okay to be confused. I wanted people to walk into a landscape and instead of embracing facts and figures and histories, to embrace the human heart. The story of these two men who lost their daughters. And it was about 2 years into the process when it struck me one day that Rami and Bassam, who were the two men, were telling the stories of their daughters in order to keep the girls alive. And it struck me that was a Scheherazade moment. And so I had to structure the novel in 1001 different cantos. And so the intentional disorientation at the beginning is almost to lull the reader in, to say, like Michael Ondaatje says sometimes, trust me, there is order here. It is faint and it is human, but if you trust me and if you come along and you embrace the confusion just for a little while, you will enter the territory of the human heart, which is where literature dwells. I mean, the job of literature increasingly, in fact, is to confront the heartbreak of the world. And maybe in terms of form, Samuel Beckett said it beautifully a couple of decades ago. He said, the job of the artist now is to find a form that accommodates the mess, because it is messy, and we have to acknowledge one of the powerful things that we can do these days is acknowledge the messiness of human experience, and that's where we begin to engage in dialogue and understanding.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because you build and you the form you look for and you find for the mess is at the same time very confusing and at the same time very symmetric, meaning that it's true that there are 1001 that is the end of symmetry, is this one, but at the same time is kind of going up the hill, a very steep hill till 500. Then there's the chapter 1001, and then from that moment on, you start the landing, you start going down. So it's a kind of a symmetric and not symmetric at the same time that gives it the kind of confusion but trust, meaning that at a certain point, that's what you were saying, in a way, you understand that you are lost, but at least there's someone that is called Colum McCann that is here who knows the way, and so who knows the fact that we are going to get out of here, or and that's the very point, in my opinion, we are going to stay in, but all together. And that's one thing that is very, very interesting to me. So when did you start? So where did you get the idea of this? It's a very basic question, but it's where stories start.
And in relation to that, just before I get into how it started, I mean, you have to trust your reader, and you have to trust that your reader is more intelligent than you are, and they will get from this book the things that you just prompt. It's almost like you whisper in their ear, and so I always have to trust my reader that she or he will get through it. So I start the journey, literally, I start the journey from a trip to Israel and Palestine with a non-profit group that I co-founded called Narrative 4, which brings young people from all over the world together to tell stories to one another and to implement action on the ground. It was a Friday afternoon It was 4 o'clock. It was rainy. I was in a town called Beit Jala, just outside Jerusalem, just outside Bethlehem. And I walk up this little staircase and I walk into a room and I'm kind of tired. And in this room are two men, and I sit down and I'm going to listen to their story. And within half an hour, my life was completely changed. My heart was my rib cage was opened, and they took out my heart and sort of wrung it dry with these stories. And I knew, those moments you get when you're experiencing something, and a voice comes and said, "You're going to remember this forever." I knew at that stage that I was changed. I went back to New York. I said, "I can't do this. I don't really know about Israel and Palestine. Am I really going to spend 5 years of my life, trying to investigate this story?" And the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't get rid of it, because it was just so powerful, that these two men, against all available odds, against all the evidence, they become the best of friends, and they travel around the world, telling the story, Scheherazade-like, over and over and over again. And I believe that these men are on a level with, say, somebody like Arundhati Roy, or even Martin Luther King or Gandhi or John Hume, and people who did the peace process in Ireland. I think they have a deep human intelligence that goes beyond facts and figures and histories and arguments, and talks about these two girls as key to the way that we need to understand one another.
Yeah, and one thing is so striking while reading the book is the fact that there's pain. Of course, there's lots of pain in this book, because telling the story is to telling and feeling and sharing the pain. But there's a fact that is very important in this novel, and this is the fact that the important thing is to share, to share a story, and that's basically the very point of literature. The fact that there's someone telling the story, and there's someone else that is listening to the story, and I guess that. As you were saying, the reader, in a way, is more important than the writer in this case, and the listener is much more important in a way than the one who tells the story. I mean, for the one who tells the story, for Rami or for Bassam, their daughters are alive. It's impossible for a father not to keep them alive in your heart. But the ones who can really keep them alive are the ones who hear the story, who listen to the story, or who read the story. So right. The question is, how much of importance has the reader while you were writing the story, and how much of importance has the verb to hear in the story you were writing about?
Oh, such an incredible, proper and good question. Jim Harrison, the American poet, once said, "Death takes away a lot of things, but it cannot take away our stories." And it strikes me that the world, some people say the world is knit together by atoms, and they're correct, molecules, quarks, whatever it is. But it strikes me that the world is really knit together by stories. And it's not just the fact that we can tell our own story, but we must be able and open to listening to the stories of others. So the idea of hearing, the idea of listening, the idea of sort of entering into new territory expands the human consciousness in extraordinary ways. So for me, yes, I was the writer of this book, but the reader was more important than in any other book that I've ever that I've ever written. And it felt to me that I was conductor of a symphony, and I was going, okay, contrabass go, and okay, piano come in, and okay, let's have the cello here, and then while I'm conducting this music, suddenly at the back of the room, the door bursts open, the light floods in, and a shape comes into the room, a person carrying a case, an instrument, which I cannot recognize, a new instrument, the sound of which I've never heard before, and I have to accommodate her into the music as it was ongoing. So that was the process of writing this novel. I wanted to write a symphony, but I kept getting new music coming at me all the time, and it was my job to try to balance it, and to pay homage to these men, and to pay homage also to history and time, and the time that was ticking inside the time that is. All of these things were important to me, but my readers are the ones who make up their minds. I don't want to be didactic. I'm not going to say one state, two states, federation, confederation. I'm not going to say I'm pro this, pro that, pro. Really, I'm interested in the reader going in and making up her own mind from what is created and suggested there.
This sense of music, that is the sound, that is at the same time the style, meaning writing, is playing music. I mean, when if I all of a sudden change now, switched into Italian, you would hear maybe the same meaning, but another sound, another music. And so, and in your novel, and Apeirogon is a symphony, and is polyphonic. There was Kunda at the end of the 70s and the 80s, and then he's completely forgotten, unfortunately. But he was one of the ones who trying to put together Cervantes and Tristram Shandy and so on, started talking about that. The idea that you can build an entire word, putting together fragments, putting together voices, and in this contemporary literature, I guess that polyphony is in a way coming back. Now, talking to you, I was thinking while saying the using the noun, the name of polyphony, I was thinking of another book that is completely different, but is in a way a dialogue with reality, that is Prayer for Chernobyl of Svetlana Alexeyevich, meaning putting together many voices to talk about something that is really burning, Chernobyl, and really burning like this kind of ghost of all the people that aren't there anymore. But I wanted to go back to listening, to hearing. That's the very point. Because as soon as you hear, as soon as you let something in you, you are committed. You can't get rid of that anymore, and that's why is very much of a responsibility what you say. So what you are pouring into the ears of the others or into the eyes through literature, and why is so much of a responsibility to open or not open your ears or your eyes to what someone else is saying. Probably the most famous, besides the Divina Commedia, the most famous novel in Italian literature is I Promessi Sposi. And there are these two young people who try to get married. And they go to the priest, to Don Abbondio, and they try to say the formula to get married. And before they say that, Don Abbondio says, no! So he doesn't want to hear. He doesn't want to hear, because if he only heard really the words, he would be committed. So he said, no, I can't hear. I want to step a little bit aside, but keeping this spot. So you also are the co-founder of an organization that is called Narrative 4. And in a way, this was the very first trip that's
Right.
from which started the story was for them. So why, if you can tell us why Narrative 4 is connected to this engagement of hearing, and what's in common between what you do with Narrative 4 and the way you write?
Thank you for that. Well, first, I have to say that I went to Israel and Palestine, about a dozen times, and I hung with with Rami and Bassam. I went on Rami's motorbike. I walked through checkpoints with Bassam. I sat with their families. I had to, I had spectacular times with them, and I had to learn how to listen very carefully. Listening was so important because I wanted to patch their stories, their stories together. And they told me things that they'd never told anybody in their life before, and precious secrets, and things that are actually in the novel now. And I have great respect for the way they told me their stories, and then I also had to listen as deeply as I could. I learned to listen a long time ago when I came to the United States, and I took a bicycle across the United States for a year and a half, and I just listened to people as I went along, and I entered what I call that sort of democracy of storytelling. And then about 10 years ago, along with Lisa Consiglio and several other activists and artists, we founded this group called Narrative 4, bringing young people together to more or less step into one another's shoes, bodies, territories, and try to understand and listen to one another. So, for example, we have kids this very day, we have kids in the South Bronx, exchanging stories with kids in Eastern Kentucky. And people think that they're so far apart that they could never come together. One is primarily black, one is primarily white, one is primarily urban, one is primarily rural, one's primarily blue, one's primarily red. How can they come together? Well, they come together in nuanced storytelling. They come together by, you tell my story, I tell yours. And when we listen, something happens in the head. When we tell a story, the brain is like a circus. But when we tell somebody else's story, the brain is a carnival with dozens of circuses going on all at once. And we engage all these things. And this is where empathy begins, decency begins, understanding begins, and then the most important thing is then action on the ground. Because, sentiment without action is no good at all, and so we get these young people to do things like start recycling centers and start talking about opioid abuse in their communities, and they tell stories and they go out and they change the world.
Yeah, and also because they when there's this exchange, meaning you exchange your story with the story of someone else, and then you tell him or her or his story. Yeah, and it's something that is because it's exactly what reading is in a way. To make your story alive, you have to borrow from me my heart, my liver, my brain, because I have to give you my emotions to make your story happen. And that's why also these two actions you do as a citizen, as an activist, as a writer, are in a way so easy and so perfectly matching, because there's this kind of a very good tunnel going from you to someone else, and from the someone else to you back. And this going back and forth is the most important thing. Connected to that, and connected to what you heard and what you saw before being a writer, You were born in Ireland, and you're so how much you're being Irish, so how much you're being growing up in the conflict, and in a situation that was unclear, was important to have the right tools or the right gaze to go back, or to move forward and go to try to tell the story that is based in the middle of another conflict.
Yeah, I grew up in Dublin, in the suburbs of Dublin. My dad was a journalist. My mum stayed at home and looked after the family. But they'd come from incredibly poor backgrounds, and my mum had been born in Northern Ireland. And every summer we took the bus from Dublin up to Derry, and I stayed on a farm in Derry, and we would cross the border, and the soldiers would get on to the bus, and the post boxes would change from green to red, and the roads would change, and the tension would come in the air, and we would go through checkpoints, and we would enter into occupied territory. I'm not going to say that the situation in Northern Ireland can be immediately aligned with what's going on in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza, because every situation is unique. But I did have a certain access into, what grief meant. I also had an access by looking at the Irish peace process, that miracle peace process in the late 1990s, which is still existing, though it's shaky at times, it's still there. And looking at that helped me, I think, to navigate what was going on when I went to Israel and Palestine. And there is an alignment there. Many people in Northern Ireland use the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a cipher for their own thing. But here's the other thing about Apeirogon, is that we all go to Jerusalem. We all go to that part of the world. I mean, this is where there's a nuclear energy in that part, a nuclear human energy in that part of the world. 3 continents meet, Africa, Europe, the Middle East, or Asia. We got at least the birthplace of at least 3 major religions. You have all this energy going on, and we all then therefore have been there. And I wanted people to go there through the story of these 2 young girls whose lives were sort of tragically taken away. And so for many years, I found them standing on my shoulder, whispering into my ear. They would sort of tell me stories. And that's how I sort of navigated this whole process. Am I still confused about Israel and Palestine? Yes. Am I still confused about Northern Ireland? Yes. And I think the ability to say I don't know is one of the most powerful things that we have, because I think that more and more the difficulty or the disease that we're experiencing right now is the disease of certainty. I'm right, you're wrong. Don't come into my room unless you look like me. Don't come into my room unless you sound like me, and don't come into my room unless you're going to say the exact same and think the exact same thing as me. And this is problematic. And the world is so multitudinous that I want to go back to that sort of Walt Whitman line. Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. And I think whether we be in Italy, whether we be in Ireland, whether we be in Palestine, whether we be in the US, one of the jobs that we have right now is to contain and celebrate our multitudes.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I guess there's one thing that is connected to repetition, meaning that you repeat in the stories being repeated in Rami and Bassam, telling their stories. It's at the same time a way to say, I don't know everything, but this is my truth. That repeat and repeat. The only things that sits there. It's just the truth of what you are telling, because otherwise you will be just in contradictions and times and so on. So they say, that's what I know. I don't know so much, but I know that maybe my life is fragment 1, maybe my life is fragment 11, and I need 1001 fragments to have a fire happening, or to and that's the point. And so going towards the end of our beautiful conversation, we were talking about the fact that sometimes you hear back your story told by someone else. I'm gonna tell you my story. You're gonna tell me back my story, and it's from that going back home that I understand something about me, one of the sides. So I was thinking that it's not only that Rami and Bassam, they always tell the story, or they keep telling the story. In this book, there's something that is even more subtle, because they keep repeating, they keep telling the story to lots of people. But there's also someone to whom they told the story that is a writer, and it's you. Meaning, what was the reaction, and or what was the truth or the version of the story they learned about their own story when they read what you wrote about them. So you gave them back their story written in a novel.
It was incredible. So I went to them and said, Rami, Bassam, I want to write a book about you. And they're like, okay, because they'd had lots of journalism written about them, beautiful documentaries, really powerful stuff that was written about them. And I said, but I'm not sure you understand what I'm saying. I'm a novelist. I make stuff up. And they said, okay. And I said, but do you understand that I might make up some things that might upset you? And they said to me very beautifully, they said, Colum, listen to me. I have had the worst thing happen to me. I lost my daughter. Nothing worse can happen to me now. And if you get even a tiny sliver of my story, a tiny sliver of my heart, you will have done me a service. And that made me, that gave me the shivers when I heard that. And I tried to be as true as possible to their stories, so that I would go over and sometimes read them some things, and they knew I was changing bits and pieces, but very, very minimal amounts. But really, what I wanted the reader to do was to get inside the head of people. I'll tell you just a very simple instance about how I changed something. Rami rides a motorbike, and I actually rode on the motorbike myself, as I said earlier. And he drives fast, and like he does in the book, and so on. And but his motorbike is an automatic. But for me, I want the reader to experience the motorbike. So I actually put him on a motorbike with gears, because I wanted the word clutch to work. I wanted the word gear to work. I wanted the revometer to work. I wanted to feel the reader to be jolted a little bit. So here's me sort of taking the truth, reshaping it into what I think is actually a deeper truth, a textural truth. And this word truth, I mean, it's the buzzword of the times, fake news, truth, post-truth. And it's the job of us, and you do it so beautifully, it's the job of us to write towards this, and to investigate what's going on, in our times. And so that's, one of the reasons why I'm sort of so proud to be, up for this award, along with all these other writers who seem to be doing, like, literature's so strong right now. They seem to be doing, working out of an inner recklessness to talk about what's going on in our world. So,
yeah, that's a great way to explain, and also to this, I guess, helps us also to get rid. To get rid of all the useless discussions about what is real, what is fiction, what is nonfiction. There's just it doesn't matter what is real. It matters what is true, and that's the whole point. And so there's the very difference. Last question. I cannot ask you, after writing this book, you are living these days, these weeks in which Israel and Palestine are again a mess. What's your feeling?
I'm devastated. I'm completely devastated. My friends are devastated. I am worried. And I come back to a line from the Mu'allaqat, which were the 6th century pre-Islamic Arabic poems that were hung in the marketplaces, all those years ago. And one line from the Mu'allaqat was particularly poignant for me, and it's, is there any hope that this desolation can bring me solace? It's an extraordinary idea. And guess what? Like today, after reading the newspapers, I would say no. There is no hope today that this desolation will bring me solace. But I really believe that tomorrow, and there is a hope that we can find some way to get through this, because walls fall, empires fall, and things do actually change. And I believe that we have to, risk ourselves in order to go in search and risk humiliation, even to go in search of some form of solace for ourselves.
Thank you. I guess these are the words. We shouldn't say anything after that. So thanks again for that, and congratulations, because Apeirogon is a very great book.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Bye, everybody.